All right, everybody. We got a very special guest for y'all this week. Everybody, please welcome to the show Dr. Andrea Lorenzo Molinari. Welcome,
Molinari.
Andrea.
Good. Good to be here. Happy to be here.
He has a soundboard now. He had to use it.
My live studio audience, Mike. I don't know what you're talking about.
Oh, there's all the people sitting on the other side of the camera. Sorry. Yeah, welcome. Thanks for being here for your first time, Andrea. Really appreciate you taking the time from your very busy schedule this weekend. So, I think, with all our first time guests, we're going to do the annoying thing of putting you through the gauntlet of giving us your origin story and how you got involved in comics, and then we'll just talk about the Shepherd after that. But
sure,
yeah.
Well, I like a lot of kids. I was born in 1967, and like a lot of kids, when my age, when I was in the one little and stuff like that, I used to go with my dad to the pharmacy and buy comics off the spinner rack. And, Dad would give me a couple quarters and, buy the comics. Loved comics as a kid. I can remember riding the school bus, and everybody would bring their tattered, no cover, rolled up, stuck in your back pocket comic books, and we'd trade them around. So, you'd never read, you'd read part 3 of a 3-part story and never, or part 1 and never read the rest of it. But you just love comics. You're just reading, everything from Punisher to Hulk to Spider-Man to Iron Fist, whatever, loved comics. And then I got to high school, and in the 80s, when I was in high school, if you didn't ever want to get a date, if you had no desire to have a girlfriend in any way, shape, or form, the best way to achieve that was to let them know that you read comics, because that would have been the kiss of death. So, since I did want to actually have a girlfriend, I decided to give up comics. So I didn't read comics in high school. And I went to college as an undergraduate, 1985. And the guy who was the next door, he was the next door dorm to me, talked to me one time, and he said, "Hey, do you like comics?" And I was like, "Yeah." And he goes, "Well, how do you feel about Batman?" I was like, "Oh, I love Batman." My experience, by the way, growing up of Batman was really twofold. Number one, watching the Batman from the 1960s television show.
Oh yeah.
And then the other experience of Batman was reading Batman, where you'd have, Batman consulting with the police, where he shows up at the crime scene. So that was my experience of Batman. And then he goes, "Well, here, why don't you read this?" And the book he gave me was The Dark Knight Returns, Frank Miller's Dark Knight Returns. And of course, it ruined me. It ruined me for comics thereafter. It's like the first hit of a drug. It's like the best it'll ever be, and it's only going to go down, from there.
You're like,
so
Batman's fighting the cops? What's
oh yeah, but
what's happening?
But the thing is that even though it was shocking, from a Batman fan point of view, it actually was the first time for me that Batman actually made sense, because the response to Batman was what felt like it probably would be,
Right.
So I really liked it from that point of view. I mean, obviously it's over the top. If you read it, it's very over the top. The whole riding of the horses and,
it is.
All of it. It's all over the top. But it was really an amazing and kind of singular comic experience. And so that's what brought me back to comics. From that point on, I was reading, collecting again, like I did when I was a kid, only taking much better care of them.
Right.
But so that brought me to comics. And, but that was as a reader. I never imagined myself, writing comics, creating comics myself. Not that I couldn't. It's just that, I was in college. I was pursuing an academic career. And I just, I was an 11-year stint in college, basically from 85 to 96. So I had my hands full, as you can imagine, with the academic stuff. After that, I ended up having this nightmare this is, down the road of obviously.
Right.
I had this nightmare about my son, which became the seed really of the Shepherd series.
Okay.
And, I basically dreamed that my son had died of a drug overdose. He was a teenager at the time, young teenager, 14, 15 years old at the time. And, in my dream, it wasn't just that happened, that event happened, but it was so real that I had to identify the body in the in the morgue,
Yeah.
seeing him in the funeral home, graveside, months later, grieving him, all that stuff. So it was a very intense and real dream, and woke up shaking and upset about it. And it really took me, a couple of days before I was able to talk to him about it, because I'm trying to figure out if this is some kind of, premonition of something to come or something horrible. And when I did tell my son about it, he was like, "Dad, that's so cool." And I'm like, "Fuck, it's not
What
fucking
the?
cool at
No,
all.
it's not. No.
It's quite the opposite,
Yeah.
actually.
Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah, it's not cool." But he was really just adamant from the very beginning. He was like, "Dad, we need to do something with this story. It's like this is cool. We need to do something." And he really was very early on was determined that it could be a graphic novel, because I mean he was fully into comics and was coming with me to the comic book stores. We were handing the books to each other, trading.
Yeah.
Oh, you should read this. You should read this. So he was determined that we could do something with it, and he pestered the ever living hell out of me to finally write it.
That's
So
awesome.
we eventually, he found a chink in the armor. I had a break in my academic work and stuff, and we sat down and we wrote it together. And when we did, it really kind of flowed out like water, because it was really different. I would say this dream was like no other dream I've ever had in my life, because normally the dreams, they don't stay with you. But this one, it was just like somebody had branded it into my soul. And so writing it was really easy. And after we wrote it, I thought I was off the hook, but he was like, no, we need to figure out, get ourselves a writer, an artist, and make this a thing, and we did. And after that, that we started, we wrote it in June of 2011. And in September of that year, we started with the art, and then we eventually would get it published for the first time in May of 15 by Caliber Comics. And that was a ride, but we loved it so much. We knew at the end of it that we wanted to do it again. So that's how I kind of got into comics. That's the origin story.
That's awesome.
No irradiated spider bites or anything.
I
like
mean
that.
having a terrifying nightmare, I don't think we've heard that one yet out of like 400 interviews. So that's a pretty I mean, it is.
New one.
Yeah, that's crazy.
It was pretty crazy. I mean, I never had a dream like that since, which I'm really glad. Because it was pretty traumatic.
Yeah, for sure.
But it really launched something for us. And the Shepherd, since then, we've, as we were talking about, we're on our fourth novel, getting it printed and published out there. The fifth one is already done, all the art and everything. It's ready to go. Hoping to get that released sometime soon through Scout. But today I'm actually writing the script for volume 6.
Wow.
So, yeah.
Yeah, that's a pretty big feat to have 6 volumes out there ready for a comic.
It's crazy because we're right at about the 600 page level right now. Now with the 5 volumes, we're right about at that 600 pages.
Yeah. So when's the omnibus coming out?
Yeah, we'll do another Kickstarter for that. But yeah.
That's awesome. So you got a question, Chris? Go ahead.
I was just gonna say, you said it came out from Scout Comics. Have they just published the issues, or I was a little confused on when I was looking it up, because it seems like Volume 4 has come out through Scout. Is this a Kickstarter for the trade that Scout will then publish, or how is that working out?
That's exactly how it's going to work. Yeah, the first issue, Scout has published it a couple different ways. Like Volume 1, because it already had been published by Caliber, they did issue 1 with slight revisions. We added a short story at the beginning, but then they went right to the trade. they call it their nonstop format, where they give you issue 1, and then a few months later they drop the entire trade. They did that with both volume 1 and volume 2 because they had already been published. And then volume 3 we did as individual issues, 4 individual issues. And then with volume 4, we really felt that this one, we wrote it as a novel. We really weren't so worried about, kind of like making it episodic as a normal comic book. We really were thinking in terms of graphic novel. And we'd have been happy to just do the graphic novel, but they wanted to do the individual issue, and we did that. And now we're working on the Kickstarter to get the entire volume and then publish that through Scout.
Okay, interesting. So I know you're 4 volumes in now, but if you could give the listeners and viewers that are getting first exposure to this, what is the Shepherd? Who's the character, and what does it follow, really?
Yeah, well, the Shepherd is the technical term for it is called a psychopomp, and a psychopomp, it's a Greek term. Think of two parts: psychopomp. Psycho is the spirit or soul, and pomp is the procession. So the leader, the guide of souls, basically what he is. So the first volume is how he gets to the afterlife because of that trauma that happens in his family that we talked about in the dream that I had.
Yeah.
So really, in a very real sense, volume 1 is the dream, is the nightmare that, it's basically been told in a story format. And so once he's there in the afterlife, he begins to help other souls that have suffered trauma. And basically the way I would describe it for you is I've always been fascinated with ghost stories where there's a reason why the ghost is haunting. And once that reason is resolved, the ghost is able to move on. And so imagine the Shepherd is basically accompanying those souls that are haunting a place and helping them kind of like stop the record from skipping, be able to change the tune, so to speak, so that the soul can move on. So volume 2 of the Shepherd is their first major adventure. And basically the story is about a hospital in the afterlife for the souls of warriors that are suffering from post-traumatic stress from their combat experiences. They basically died before they were able to address the issues, that they have, the combat stress that they have. And so in the afterlife, we imagine them resolving it there, and so we basically tell the story of 4 different warriors from different time periods and cultures that are at that hospital, and they're kind of, getting the treatment that they need, in the afterlife. Wow. So it's pretty heavy stuff, but that one actually has an origin in my family's work, because my wife works for the VA, and that's what she does. She's a post-traumatic stress counselor for combat, military sexual trauma as well, traumatic brain injury. But that's what she does. So I'm hearing that, all the time, in my home. So to tell a story about it, all I did is project that work projected into the afterlife.
Right, for sure. Yeah, having that in your household, I mean, that's a huge thing for her. But then it makes it very important to you to talk about those things too, I'm sure, right? So
absolutely.
Yeah.
Wow. How many times did she revise and edit it to get things right that you messed up?
Well, that's why, it was wonderful because I definitely used her as a source. And in fact, she actually gave me an essay. I asked her to write an essay that we published as part of the volume.
Oh, wow.
That talks about the causes of stress, the symptoms and the causes, and also talks about the hopeful treatments that are available now to deal with it, because this isn't new. Our awareness of post-traumatic stress is new, but I mean, they were calling it shell shock in the Civil War,
right?
Right. And it's always been there. I mean, it's it's always been there for combat veterans. Some of them experience it worse than others, but it can really do a lot of damage to the personal lives of these people, men and women, when they come back, into the normal. To their normal everyday lives. Yeah. So,
I was actually
something we worked on.
I was actually interviewing someone recently, and I've talked to a few people behind the scenes where like PTSD has become quite the subject matter for some comics and
Yes.
across the board, like TV and everything. And a big part of that is Mike and I are around the same age, and we're of the war on terror generation, if you will.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And we watch so many people come home from that and dealing with all that.
Yeah, a
I
lot
think
of
that's
friends
really
and stuff.
having a big. It's become really important to our generation to talk about it, and it's been great to see, especially having friends that served and family members that served.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And of course,
that's awesome.
there's so many of them that come back and take their own lives.
Mhm. Yep.
In fact, my wife got involved with this because she was dealing with the homeless. She was working with the Salvation Army and
Mhm.
working with the homeless. And it turns out that many of the homeless were veterans.
Yep.
And
Oh,
what were
yep.
happening was they were using drugs and alcohol to self-medicate to deal with their PTSD.
Right.
And that's what got her interested in doing the treatment for these veterans and even active duty, because we have people who are active duty that are struggling, with this.
Right.
I mean,
Yeah, of course. Yep.
even people like SEAL team members, people that are,
Mhm.
going out on these intense missions and coming back, So
Yep.
she's a kind of a hero of mine. I'm really proud of the work that she does.
Yeah, that's amazing.
Yeah. So that became very natural for us to tell a story, and place it in the afterlife. And
Yeah.
then volume 3 is focusing in on the children of the shepherd, because when the main character, his name is Dr. Lawrence Miller, is a professor. When he goes into the afterlife, he leaves behind, obviously part of his family is left behind. And the children that are left behind exhibit paranormal abilities. And the third volume is two adventures that deal with them. And I actually wrote one of them with my daughter.
Cool.
It's called The Pit. And I'll tell you the story of that one because you might find it amusing. I asked my daughter if she wanted to, because I've been writing with my son, my oldest son, Roberto. Right. And I said, well, to her, I said, but you're a character in this book. I'd love for you to help me write a story about your character. And she's like, fine, but it's got to involve dogs. And I'm like, what? And I said, well, how many dogs? And she's like, as many as you can pack into that story. I'm like,
all of them, all the dogs. Yeah.
What? So I didn't know what to do. I'm like, and I said, well, let me think about it. And a few days later, I was out on my run. I'm an avid runner. Mm-hmm. And the idea came to me like a lightning bolt. And I'm like, okay, this will be a story about a ghost dog who dies in a dog fighting ring and goes to the kids and asks for their help to rescue the other dogs in the dog fighting ring. So that's the story. It's called The Pit. Yeah. It's part of volume 3. It's a one shot, just 25 pages. And but it's about a ghost dog who dies in a dog fighting ring and then goes to the children and leads them on a midnight rescue attempt to try to get the rest of the dogs out of the dog fighting ring.
So but, you fit quite a few dogs in it. That's amazing.
Lots of dogs. There were lots.
Yeah. That's awesome.
I was like, I told her, I said, is this enough dogs? Because there was like 12 dogs in the story. And she's like, well, I would describe it as a moderately acceptable amount of dogs. I'm like,
you're getting there.
The artist is going to kill us if we ask for any more dogs. So this is it. This is as many as we're doing.
That's amazing.
So, yeah. And volume 4, which is the one we're working on right now, is a romance in the afterlife. And that one, that's what makes it special for me, is that my son, my co-writer, Roberto, is our lead writer for that one. And it's fun to really watch his evolution as a writer in the course of us working together. Because in volume 1, he was like I describe him as like a parrot over my shoulder, saying, hey, that, this character wouldn't say that. He would say it like this, and so we change it, or he'd say, get up, I'll get in there. He gets in there and rewrites a line or rewrites a description of a panel or something like that. But then in volume 4, he really kind of takes the wheel and says, okay, let me drive. I'm going to tell this story. So it's pretty fun.
Yeah.
Can I real quick? Can I rewind to volume 3 because I have a question for you there? Because you're hitting on something else that I'm very passionate about. So my favorite breed of dog is the Dachshund, and I know there's a lot of like issues inside dogfighting. I mean, obviously the obvious about dogfighting rings, but one of the big issues is when you find a lot of dachshunds at these shelters, a lot of them come from those dogfighting rings because they're easy prey for these bigger dogs to take out. Do you
Yeah.
get into that at all in the story, or is it just
we
not?
we did a lot of research, and it was a way, dude. I had no idea when I started that what I was digging into.
Yeah.
I mean, I knew dogfighting was bad because it's like the whole idea. It's like, okay, these people, but my knowledge of it was like I'd never seen a dog fight or wanted to see. I love dogs, so
Mhm.
I would never, be supportive of something like that. But my imagination of it was, okay, these two people, they train these dogs, they fight each other. It's like boxing but with dogs. I was like, wow, was I wrong? They file the teeth down
Mhm.
of the dogs so that they're sharper. When you see those pit bulls that have their ears clipped so short,
Mm-hmm.
it's because they do it so that the dog's ears can't be grabbed by the other dog.
Yep.
Wow.
Because they literally, like, you can find this by doing a Google search. We've seen the actual dogs that have been in these dog fighting rings where they're missing the jowl, like it's gone.
Mm-hmm.
It's been ripped off them, and you can see their teeth from the side of their face.
Wow.
And what you're talking about, them teaching the dogs how to attack by attacking like a victim dog, a more passive dog. I'm not surprised. I didn't know that they use that particular breed, which is tragic because they're so cute. I mean, they're such a cute dog.
I know.
Yeah.
But then again, what dog would deserve that? No dog deserves
Yeah,
that.
none
kind of
do.
treatment.
Right.
They're such a great breed, and it's referred to as bloodlust. That they get them to attack them and give them a bloodlust. And if you go to a shelter and you see a lot of dachshunds around, 9 times out of 10 they broke up a dog fighting ring, which is terrible. I wish I had all the time in the world to take care of these dogs. I don't.
Yeah.
But it's terrible what they do to that breed.
Yeah. No, I like I said, I was blown away by what I learned, and I hope if in some way that story, that short story, will raise people's awareness of how bad it is, because we do really try to show what they do to those dogs, because they really treat them like they're a thing and not like they don't have any value,
Right.
And
Powerful.
I remember listening to this interview. They had actually were interviewing this dog fighting guy, and he had his voice modulated, and he was wearing a mask, so you couldn't see his face or anything. And he was talking about how much he loved his dogs. I was like, dude, I have dogs, and I know what it feels like to love a dog. And if you love a dog, you're not going to put them at risk on purpose.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
You're not going to put them in one
love,
of those.
man.
Yeah.
Whatever you're feeling is not love.
Yeah.
You don't do that.
As we kind of talked about ahead of the show, like being a big Philadelphia Eagles fan, when Vic joined the team, I was like, it was brought right into my face, this whole world, and I did a lot of research on it back in the day. And so, it's brutal what they do to these dogs across the board.
Yep.
Yeah.
And switching it up back to Volume 4, you talk about in the because you have the pre-launch page up on Kickstarter, the for lovers of horror and gothic romance. So do you want to talk a little bit about how you kind of bring that genre into the new volume?
Yeah, I mean, the gothic horror, at least as I understand it, one of the things that really sets it apart is that it deals with deeper issues. Take Frankenstein, for example. Frankenstein, in a lot of ways, is grappling with the idea of a creator that doesn't seem to care.
Yep.
Because you have Dr. Frankenstein, who basically abandons and doesn't care about his creation. And in a lot of ways, that's a metaphor for how humanity sometimes feels about God, is that God just kind of put us here. We look at the world that we're surrounded by, and, the argument, of course, that religion likes to put forth is free will. And they're like, well, okay, I'm all for free will, but clearly we have no fucking idea what to do with it.
Right. Yeah.
And we definitely need some coaching at the very least, like hands-on, because, it's like allowing children to basically take care of the candy store. Nothing good is going to come of that,
Right.
So that's why when we talk about like the gothic idea is that, it's a metaphor. We're using this horror story as a metaphor to probe into deeper philosophical issues.
Mm.
And so that's,
Okay.
that's kind of what we're doing. The romance element and horror, mixing those together. It's the basic story of volume 4 is the main character is the son of Dr. Miller. So think back to what the dream was, the original nightmare. In the original nightmare, the oldest son, my oldest son, dies of a drug overdose.
Mm-hmm.
So in this story, in volume 1, the oldest son, Val, of Dr. Miller, dies of a drug overdose, and Dr. Miller goes after him into the afterlife to try to save him.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Mm.
And so now in volume 4, you have, Dr. Miller and his son Val are in the afterlife. They've been helping souls. They've been trying to make a difference there. But Val is coming to the realization that, he's 16 and a half years old and he's never going to be older than that. So that means he's never going to have, a love.
Mm-hmm.
He's never going to get married. He's not going to have children. He's not going to have the career. He's not going to have, well, maybe he has a career, I guess, as a psychopomp in the afterlife.
Right.
But he's grappling with realization that there are many things about life that he isn't going to get to experience.
Mm-hmm.
And, he's not in a good place in his head. And he is kind of like getting more and more violent in the afterlife, because one of the things we get into in the afterlife is that souls have the ability to choose if they're going to move on or not. And if they don't choose to move on, they don't move on.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And he is really struggling with all those issues, mourning the losses that he won't be able to have. And the chief among them is to really have a love of his life,
Mm-hmm.
and he ends up meeting this girl in the afterlife, and she has this chain attached to her ankle. And when he meets her, she's being attacked by these like wraiths that are trying to kill her. And he intervenes and saves her, and it begins the beginning of a relationship that they have. And that relationship begins as a friendship and eventually evolves into something romantic. And then we start to find out that there's a lot more to her story that she isn't even fully aware of. Like, she's managed to block some of the trauma. It's like she's
Mm-hmm.
blocked it out of her psyche. And so that's kind of what volume 4 does, is explore, her backstory and the relationship that Val has. So it's kind of those twofold thing. Val grappling with his own desire, to be human, to live the life that he should have had,
Mm-hmm.
and then at the same time helping somebody else. So,
Oh, okay.
How much fun are you having, like, switching the genres through volumes of this thing
Yeah.
you've created? Like,
Yeah,
it
it
seems like you
sounds
started off one way and now you're all the way to like gothic romance. It's a pretty
Yeah.
like crazy arc so far.
Yeah.
yeah,
And
it
can
gets
that continue to
crazier.
happen?
I think so, because volume 5, which is the one that's next, is called The Burning Maid, and it is a courtroom horror. And the story, let me pitch the story to you and see what you think of this. So The Burning Maid is about Joan of Arc. Okay. Now, Joan of Arc, I don't know how much you know about Joan of Arc.
Mm-hmm.
She could be very responsibly argued to be the mother of modern France. Okay. During the 100 Years' War, during the 15th century, England was struggling for control of what is, northern France, or most of the northern parts of France. They had a claim. They actually had a legitimate claim, because the current king, the English king at the time, was actually descended from the French crown. So they actually had, but think about how ludicrous that would be, is that the English king is now also king of France. It's just,
Yeah.
that's not going to work.
Right.
So they're fighting this 100 Years' War, and Joan feels compelled by God to come, whether you believe that or not. She feels compelled by God to lead the Dauphin, to be the crown prince, to become king of France, and to throw off the English rule. And so she goes to him, she appeals to him, he gives her an army. Lo and behold, she's like a tidal wave, and just victory after victory after victory after victory. She sees the Dauphin crowned, but then she tries to lay siege of Paris. She's unable to do it, and eventually captured in battle, put in prison, put on trial by the English.
Mhm.
Of course, it's not going to be a fair trial. And we actually have the trial transcripts have survived to us. So she's actually put on trial by the church and burned at the stake. You may be aware of that, at least.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
Eventually, she's burned at the stake because she's accused of heresy, which is like the ultimate crime in Christianity at the time. And she's burned at the stake for it. But her crime is that she wore men's clothes. I'm not making this up.
Right.
She
dare
wore
she.
men's clothes because she was a soldier. She was a soldier wearing soldier's clothes on the battlefield. And they condemn her. You could tell, I mean, it's a kangaroo court, basically. But I imagine to myself, in the historical record, they eventually do a retrial after she's been burned at the stake. They do a retrial. Her name is cleared. And then in the 20th century, early 20th century, she's made a saint of the Roman Catholic Church. Again, you may be aware of that.
Yep.
So that's the story. But I asked myself this question. I said, what if, which all the good stories begin with what if she's not aware of any of this in the afterlife? What if she's not aware that her name's been cleared? What if she's not aware that they made her a saint? What if she's just angry at those men that did this to her, especially men from the church who did this to her? So I imagine a story where she's hunting these men down, making them relive the trial, and then at the very end, instead of her burning at the stake, she burns them at the stake. But imagine that on rinse and repeat for eternity.
Oh, yeah.
Okay?
Yeah.
So that's the story of the burning maid, is the shepherd is dropped into that 15th century rehash and is trying to pull that car back onto the road, so to speak, with Joan of Arc. So that is, I share all that because it's a courtroom horror. So you want to talk about a new genre.
Yeah,
I don't
that's
even know
crazy.
if that's a thing, but that's what we did.
That's awesome. That's amazing. Yeah, I don't think I've ever heard of anything like that. So,
it's amazing to me because you had this strange nightmare and it turned into this comic, and now as you're describing it, even I am sitting here you've created this thing that can go in so many different directions, and even I have these ideas you do this one, you do this one, you do, and just keep moving on with it. It seems like a character that could go on forever and ever.
Yeah,
you could. And what Roberto and I realized early on is because it takes place. See, keep in mind, it takes place in the afterlife. Okay, anybody who's ever lived in any culture that you would like to explore, in any time period, is fair game. So we could tell a Viking story. We could go to feudal Japan. We could do a Zulu story. We could be in the Amazon. 300 years ago, we could do an Aztec story. It literally is just up to our interest to pursue it, or energy or money, for quite frankly, money to pay for the art, But yeah, that's the part that really was shocking to us as we realized that our publisher, our president of our company, James Hake, actually refers to the shepherd as a quantum leap in the afterlife.
Okay, yeah. That makes sense. Yeah.
Which I thought, I hadn't thought of it that way, but I guess you could compare it. Now, not all of our stories are historical, but some are. Like, for example, The Tether is really not a historical. It's not, it's set in, her life could have happened, last year. Her death could have happened last year. But some of them are, like The Burning Maid. Like I said, it's squarely, we had to do a lot of research on the 15th century, I assure you, down to the clothes, the weaponry, the armor, all of that. And, and we're really excited about how people will respond to that one. I think it'll be fun to see. Yeah.
Yeah. No, that sounds like a really interesting take on it.
Yeah.
Like her not knowing that she was saint. Yeah. And so you talked about Volume 4 is going to be the next installment, and the Kickstarter will be live October 1st, right?
Correct. Right
Okay.
now, we do have the pre-launch page, as you mentioned. And if people are listening to this, then we'd love for you to, support us on that page. Any help is good. We put together a lot of really nice rewards. We think some very unique stuff
Cool.
for the Kickstarter, and we had a really beautiful Kickstarter for Volume 3, and produced a wonderful hardcover volume that I'm really proud
Oh, nice.
of. So.
Great.
And as a way to kind of wrap it all up, what can you share that people can expect for the Kickstarter? Like different covers, bookmarks, any kind of fun stuff?
Yeah, certainly different covers. That's kind of a given. Of course, you'd be able to buy all the volumes. All the previous volumes are going to be part of it. There's a couple of unique things, and I'll mention them. If you were to look at the Shepherd Facebook and Instagram page and scroll through there, we actually have 3D resin statues of our main characters, the Shepherd and Legio. Legio is a wolf wraith in the afterlife. And those figures, you could, like I said, if you go to the Shepherd comic at Instagram or Facebook, you can scroll through and find examples of what they look like. They're beautiful. They really turned out beautifully. The other thing that we have that people might find interesting that's extremely unique is Scout has what are called press works. And press works are when they print the comics, they do the 4-color printing method, cyan, magenta, yellow, and black, CMYK.
Yep.
They are metal plates. These are the original plates that were used to print the Shepherd.
Oh, cool.
And they're available as rewards on the Kickstarter. So
That's
you can,
awesome.
that's the statue right there. I'm real proud of it.
Cool.
The detail's very good.
Yeah, that's really good.
Yeah. And those are 9 inches. That's 9 inches tall. That's about a pound. It weighs about a pound. It's made out of resin.
Wow.
And I make a point of saying resin because if you know anything about 3D printing, they also do it out of filament. And filament's very light and it's kind of brittle, whereas the resin is much stronger and more
rigid.
Solid and heavy. Yeah. And by the way, that the staff that you see, it actually slides out of the hands of the Shepherd.
Cool. Wow.
So it's actually separate. So, and we did that so that when it would be shipped, it'd be safer, it'd be less likely to get broken.
Right. Okay. Awesome.
So,
no, that's really cool detail.
Yeah. And you're talking about the metal plates. There's actually one behind me right now from a Scout book, and I can tell everybody that they're really nice, really cool, like collector's items for books you love.
Yeah.
Yeah. If you think about them, I like to think of them as kind of industrial art. Because, industrial art is made out of something that was actually, like used, like in work. Right. And that's exactly this, is these plates for whatever page, whatever issue, whatever page that you have on the wall, that's the only one of that color. That's the only one that's ever going to be of that color. And it's like, it touched every comic book that was made of that print run. And to me, that's just really cool. And the way that the ink hits the page, if you were to do that print a year from now and reprint it with a new set of plates, it wouldn't be the same because the ink hits the plates and stays on the plates in different ways. And one of the things you'll see, we have different names for them. You probably have seen this yourself, but you have plates where you have the magenta and the yellow appearing on the same plate. And we call it pink lemonade. Nice. And then you have magenta and the cyan or the blue on the page, and that is we call that the blue raspberry.
Nice,
because
that's awesome.
But it's that two-tone quality to the print plate that is just, they're gorgeous and they're super addicting. If I was in my home office as I'm doing this interview, you'd be able to see behind me, my wall is covered with the plates.
Oh,
I've probably
that's
got
cool.
12 or 13 plates, and I've got more. I just haven't framed them yet to put up on the wall.
That's awesome. Yeah,
they're really cool collector's items. If you're like a super fan of a book or just want a cool item from a unique item from a comic, they're a cool collector's item.
Yeah, it's a really cool way to invest. Andrea, thanks so much for taking the time today. This is a great discussion, I think, about the project you're doing and the directions you can take it in. But I know you have a website for the project, right, where you can find some of the older volumes that are available for the Shepherd, if you want to talk about that.
Sure. The website is theshepherdcomic.com.
Yep.
And similar to our Facebook and Instagram addresses. And all the stuff is there. Also, there's a lot of swag that's available, and we tried to keep it, very affordable. Because I'm not really interested. I know this is going to sound weird, but I'm not really interested in making money off this stuff.
Yep.
This is a hobby that we do, and
right.
I mean, I want to disabuse people of this idea, comic book, at least writers, I can speak for the writer. We're not driving Maseratis. I'm sitting here in a Prius, okay?
That's awesome.
All of the money, that I make as an editor for comics, it goes into the art. It goes to my artists,
Okay. Yeah.
But I don't begrudge it. I love, for me, getting the art, when I get the new art from my artists, I feel like I'm 5 years old on Christmas morning every damn time. That's awesome. And dude, I've been doing this, like I said, since September. I started getting art in September of 2011, and it's still like Christmas morning when I get new art from my artists.
That's awesome.
So,
yeah, it's always a cool feeling.
It's wonderful stuff.
Yeah.
And seeing your ideas, get drawn. There's something about that is just, really cool.
It's a really cool experience. Yeah. Again, thanks. Yeah. Thanks for taking the time. You talked about some of the places you can find the Shepherd. Is there any social media for yourself that you want to tell anybody to follow for the stuff you're doing? Or?
Well, yeah. I mean, hit us up on Facebook and Instagram. Instagram is the one that I use the most, to be honest, because it's very visually oriented and it makes the most sense from my perspective. And I tried Twitter, but Twitter felt too much like junior high to me. I was just like, I don't think so. It's just it felt so toxic. I was just like, holy crap. Everybody's like righteous and
I know
this person and outing that person. I'm just like, man, you guys got a lot more time on your hands than I do. So just
because they can say things doesn't mean they should,
Oh yeah. So for me, I found that Instagram is a lot more positive environment. And I mean, for me, I just want comics to be, I'm not competing with other comic book creators. They're colleagues.
Right.
I'm happy for them to succeed. I want them to succeed. I'd love, in a perfect world, I'd love all of us to sell all of our books, all the time.
Exactly.
And, the only way you're a competitor for me is if you're writing a book called The Shepherd that deals with a guy in the afterlife helping other souls. Then you're a competitor.
Yeah, then you got a problem. Yeah.
But otherwise, let's do it. Let's do it. And it's a lot of fun. I mean, I will tell you this, one of the greatest blessings of working in comics, I mentioned that I edit for Scout Comics. And one of the greatest things about the editing is meeting so many creatives from all over the world, because I have literally edited guys and gals from, places like Croatia and Spain and Brazil and, New Zealand and Australia, all over the place. And it's been an incredible experience. It really has.
That's amazing. Yeah, that's awesome.
Definitely. So everybody out there listening, watching, make sure to go check out the campaign and follow Andrea for all of his future volumes of The Shepherd. But the drill by now. Down in the show notes down below, there will be links both to the Kickstarter and to the Shepherd website, so you can check out the campaign and previous volumes of the book. And when you go to the Kickstarter, make sure to hit that notification button so you know when the project goes live on October 1st. Andrea, thanks so much for dropping by and chatting today. It's been awesome talking with you, and we look forward to the next time.
Yeah, thanks.
Thanks, guys. I appreciate it.